This is Rugby Unity. I am David Pembroke and Ewen McKenzie. Wallabies, magnificent, but not quite good enough on the night. What are the three things that you took out of the Test match against the British and Irish Lions in Melbourne last Saturday night?
The quality of the Wallaby tactics, particularly in the first 30 minutes. And then I guess the departure from those tactics in the next 50 minutes. We only scored 3 points in that last 50-minute period. And I was impressed by the quality of the Lions' tries. I thought that the way that they were under pressure for long periods of time and they were able to still create very skillful tries, a mix of backs and forwards and the like. So it was a high-quality game for me. Obviously, everyone's talking about the refereeing at the end, but there were lots of critical moments during the game, which I thought were important. But they were the three things. Obviously, great atmosphere. I think you were at the game, Pemby. You might know more about what the atmosphere was like.
Yeah, well, the atmosphere was outstanding, just over 90,000 people. But the atmosphere was outstanding because the game was exciting. There was so much going on. There was so much back and forth. There was so much contest throughout the whole occasion. So it really lifted to the occasion. And I would rate it up amongst the best Test matches that I've ever been at. And certainly the MCG is a marvellous venue, but also the city of Melbourne and the way it's connected up to the grounds just creates that festival atmosphere. The British and Irish Lions fans were out in big numbers, and it was just an incredible experience over the weekend to be down there. So, Eddie Jones, for you, what were your highlights out of the match? What did you see that you thought were outstanding?
Well, just firstly, as Link said, the quality of the game. Yeah, I think rugby's got that when the contests and continuity's about right, which it seemed to be in the game. Like there was a lot of contests in the air, not much contest in the scrum until the last probably 30 minutes. And the breakdown started to see more towards the end of the game. It's an unbelievable game to watch, because there's such unpredictability. There's such tactical battle in it, compared to watching League on Sunday, which I love League, but I was watching the Manly Canterbury game. And there's one way to win the game, and that's to get down the field as quickly as you can. That's through sets of 5 tackles and a kick. Whereas, watching the Test match on Saturday night, you're just thinking, right, how are they going to get back in the game lines? How are the Wallabies going to maintain their ascendancy? So that was the first thing. I think the second was just the influence of key players like Skelton at the start of the game and Valentini, as Ewan said, with the tactics they played, they just bashed their way over the game line through some subtlety, but physical might. Got quick ball, and the Wallabies looked good. And it looked like the opposite of the previous Test. And then at the end of the game, I thought guys like Genge came on. Owen Farrell played a big part. They were able to for the Lions to win, and win in albeit a controversial manner, but win well through the quality of their play. And the last thing I'd say was that if he hadn't allowed that try, then basically the clean-out would be out of the game in rugby, because he couldn't do anything more legal than he did. Now, the argument is he hit his head. Yes, we know that. But he couldn't do anything more legal than that. And if you don't allow that sort of clean-out, we might as well forget about rucks and have play the balls.
So, Ewan, what was your view on the...
Look, for me, we've been talking about this for a couple of weeks now. Australia did an outstanding job of just playing hard, straight at them, not lateral, just direct. And they did a really good job. They played the short side. We talked about that. Skelton close off the ruck. It was really good. What it required was the line out to back it up, because what they did was they pumped the Lions. The Lions have no way of getting the ball back in the ruck situation. We've been saying that for 2 weeks. No way of getting the ball back. So the penalties flowed. The inevitable yellow card flowed. But the Wallabies backed it up with some outstanding line-out play. Their line-out was so good. The variety, the little tactics, short side, over the back, they mixed it up really well. So that it was complementary. That was the first 30 minutes for me was terrific. The trick was and we always say it, you get your time with the ball. The Wallabies had 70% of the possession at the 30-minute mark, but could they maintain the discipline? The discipline wasn't, I'm not talking about discipline with penalties, I'm talking about discipline to keep going with the same game plan. Like, don't get bored with it, just keep doing the same thing. But we started to drift, we dropped a few balls, and the Lions were that good that they were able to come back with a couple of tries late in the half, so it was 3 tries apiece at half time. So, and unfortunately, in the second half, there were changes in personnel and the like, and the Lions scrum came into the game. They were able to exert pressure there, and we didn't stick to the knitting of pumping away and doing the same thing because the Lions couldn't get the ruck ball back. It was an immense source of frustration, and we didn't have the discipline to keep that going across the game. We did a couple of cheap clean-outs. I think Wilson did one, and we cleaned out past. We talked about that too with the referee. Cleaned out past the ruck. We were hot on attack. That was going to be points for us some way, and instead turned the possession round back up the field. There's a couple of another Sawali
did another one.
Clean it from the side. That's the discipline I'm talking about, and that's what unfortunately let them back into the contest. So it ends up 5 tries to 3. It was 3 tries all. Australia only got 3 points in the second half. They got 2 tries. So, but there was some outstanding tactics there. It was just, can we stick with the knitting? And unfortunately, we started Australia, and maybe fatigue, change in personnel probably didn't help. And then the scrum suffered, and we were lucky. I thought we were lucky. It was 26-24, 10 minutes to go. There was a series of scrums, Lions hot on attack. They'd already milked 3 penalties from scrum on their own ball, right? So everything was in the Lions' favour, and the referee did everything he could not to award a penalty at that scrum to the Lions, which would have made it 27-26 with 10 to go. Different game. But that didn't happen. He blew the free kick. The Lions played on. So there were critical moments there where the game could have been different. And so we struggled at scrum second half, and we didn't stick to the knitting. We didn't stick to what was working in the first half. And that'll work next week too, because the Lions, apart from Jack Morgan, have no way of getting the ball back at the ruck as long as you play with discipline and you don't do silly clean-outs. We, again, was in our last podcast. That's how you're going to beat them.
Eddie Jones?
And we went very close.
Yeah, well, I think in the first 3 possessions in the second half, the Wallabies turned over.
Right.
And so when they had a chance to, like, they had the lead at half time, and they had a chance the first 10 minutes of the second half to really put the sword to the Lions. If they get the next score, like a try in that next 10 minutes, then the game's a difficult game for the Lions. They're really chasing their tails. But they just didn't have that consistency and that focus and the discipline in the tactical discipline of just keep doing the simple stuff. Like the simple stuff's the hard stuff, and that's the difference between the really good teams and the teams underneath that. Yeah, and the Wallabies are definitely on the improve. They're definitely on the improve, and that was a really good performance. But there's still that gap in the tactical discipline to just keep doing it.
You don't have to be embarrassed, Look, it was working. The first 30 was brilliant. You don't have to get embarrassed by the tactics. Like, the crowd was loving it. We just had to keep doing it, and we didn't have to do anything. Possession was king. We talked about keepings off. These tactics will work against the Lions. When we talk about the All Blacks and Springboks, it'll be a different conversation. But these tactics are very direct, making sure you win your ruck ball. The Lions' frustration will come into play, and it did, and that's how you win. And so we got a good look at it. I'll be really interested to see if where it goes in the third test. It'll be very interesting because I don't see the tactics changing. The opportunity for Australia is still there, and that'd be great for them to do that in the third test.
So, Ewan, how important was the contribution of Will Skelton and Rob Valentini to set that platform, for the Wallabies in the first half?
They bend the line, and we talked about this with other players as well, but those 2 guys, they bent the line. I love there's a little play there with Skelton. He went from short side to open side. He switched sides of the ruck attack, right? Little things like that are subtle, but every time we were able to play on the front foot and with good discipline in terms of the clean out, we weren't over-committing. what happens is if you get a bit lazy or a bit tired, you're not accurate, so more people have to commit. Then you run out of players for the next one. But you need to be disciplined. Those two guys led by example. It was a real pity that they went on the field longer. I think that they set the tone, and it was good. The other guys followed, and then the other guys were complimentary. It changed a bit. But the line-out tactics that went with that, I can't understate. They were very good line-out tactics. We 100% possession there. We just kept winning line-outs. And that allowed us to put more pressure on, more field position, another penalty. Then the yellow card came. We scored a couple of tries, I think, in that period too. So that's how the whole pressure game was going to work, and they did a really good job. So close, but so far in the end.
If I can just follow up on that, Pemby.
Yeah, mate.
So, as Ewan said, they were able to win their ruck ball easy because they were carrying close and tight and with power. And then they took the contest out of the line out, one at the front, one at the back. And you could see Itoje getting slightly agitated. Mm-hmm. And in fact, Itoje gave away 2 penalties in the first 25 minutes because he couldn't get into the game.
Yeah.
So he had to try to force a penalty. But to his great credit, Maro, like when he was first in Test rugby, he'd go on and give another 2 or 3 penalties away, because he wanted to get in the game, but he pulled himself back. You could see it at the next line out, the second penalty he gave. He jumped across, but he didn't make contest. And so he's matured as a player, which was, a real rap for him. And I thought his captaincy looked to be pretty good, although I didn't like in the game how we had the captains going up to the referee. I think that's a look we want to get out of rugby. And the TMOs brought that in, because they're all saying, let's have a look. Can you have a look at that? The coaches, we all do it. The coaches are yelling to the captains, go and talk to him, tell him you saw this, tell him you saw that. And I think that's something we want to get out of the game, because it's not a good look, and it hasn't been a part of rugby. And I think, part of our virtue of our game is that, we do have a respectful game, and I think we want to keep that in. But I thought he did a great job captaining the team.
But the criticism of Wilson the week before was that he was too passive. And that whereas Itoje was up at the referee the week before at O'Keefe, Wilson was sort of hanging back. Whereas this week, clearly he was told, mate, you get up there and argue the case, because he was very active over the match, the entirety of the match.
Yeah, I'm not arguing that, mate. I'm arguing the look of the game. When we got 2 captains badgering the referee, I don't think it's a good look.
Your thoughts, Ewan?
Well, I think at the elite level, you've got the advantage or disadvantage of having TMOs and all these sorts of things. I think about the game the whole way down. There's so many games of rugby the referee just by one referee and a guy from each side, from the club who's holding the touch flag. That you got to think about the game at all levels.
Yeah.
So we don't want to get hung up. We need to be able to. The referee needs to maintain respect and maintain he's making decisions out there. He's doing the best he can. There's plenty of test matches, where we look back and go, Jesus, how'd they get that wrong? But it happens, So you get into the merits, and you can get the law book out, and everyone's there. And I've seen it online. Everyone's talking about this and ruck entry and all this sort of stuff. And was it a ruck? And was it a tackle? There's all sorts of things. The referee's got a lot going on, and now the TMO's there. It's a bit like the captains are obliged to go there to talk to the TMO via the referee. It's got all very complicated, and I look back to the old days where you just had a one referee, and he was doing the best he could, and everyone seemed to respect that. So I find it, it's got a little bit complicated, and the guy made a call and he got on with it. And, sometimes it's right, wrong. I don't think he'll ever know if there's a right or wrong answer on that. He made a call, though, and that's what it is. So, but Eddie was right before. We got to think about the game as it's refereed week in, week out, club level, school level up, and make sure that we can actually clean out and do things at the ruck and the tackle that don't just create a situation. Otherwise, we'll just go and pick 14 guys that jackal a ball and just milk penalties all day. Just get clean out penalties and yellow cards for people who can't clean out legitimately because they're just bending over at the ruck.
Just getting back to the referee issue there. Clearly he's copping a bit of heat for that last decision at the moment. But part of the joy of the game on the weekend was it just moved and it kept going, and there was a great deal of excitement. And I think the referee deserves some credit for that. And I know straight after the game, Eddie Jones, talking to you, you said, the referee did a good job.
Yeah, no, I think he did, mate. I think he did. Yeah, I think he got his position wrong on the Jake Gordon try. I think they got to be careful. They got to be careful. The referee being in the defence line in that situation, like he should be behind the ruck there, and he should be. I hope he's coached on that in the future, because it's not a good position to be in, and he definitely provided obstruction for the 9 to go through.
100%. I agree on that. And in rugby league, that wouldn't have been a try.
Because
no way. Porter didn't get a chance to make the tackle. And no one's talked about that, but that was earlier in the game. And sometimes tries look really easy. Sometimes there's a reason, and you look back at that, and it looked too easy given the quality of the Lions' defence.
Yeah.
But no one even talked about it. No one even reviewed it or whatever. But, I think that's something for him to learn in that game. But I thought he did a good job. He's obviously selected for a reason. The refereeing fraternity, the guys they've picked him for a reason. And I thought he managed the game pretty well. There was a lot going on. A lot went Australia's way, don't forget. And that whole first half there, Australia had all the ball, they're getting all the penalties. Then he followed through with the yellow card for multiple sort of ill-disciplined efforts. So, I think I was more concerned about the scrum at the end there, because there was a scrum dominance established in the second half, and he didn't follow through with that. That was probably my concern. Yeah.
So in terms then of the benches and the changes that took place, like when both of you were watching the games and you were thinking about, okay, I've got my bench, when am I going to make my changes? And clearly you don't quite have all of the information that, Joe Schmidt and his coaching team would have had to make those changes. But Ewen McKenzie, what were you thinking going into that halftime break? Were you starting to see that Skelton only had another 5 or 7 to 10 maybe left in him?
I didn't see that. I mean, the tactical approach was quite direct. That's much easier for big guys to, it wasn't like I was going side to side. So I fully expected, those guys to sort of, once you have 15 minutes off at half time, you freshen up a bit. You're going to get another 10 or 15 at least, you would have thought. Valentini's been out for a while, so that might have been different, but I fully expected there wouldn't be much change. Clearly, the 6-2 bench cost them a bit with the winger situation, the coverage side of it, but they patched that up for the game. But that was in terms of the total coverage, and we mentioned that last time around, that the midfield situation wasn't quite covered the way the bench was structured, and I didn't think they'd cover it the way they did, but he did all right out there. But no, I didn't expect much change. I thought they'd just keep doing more of the same, and but I don't know if they're injuries or whatever, but clearly I think the scrum suffered in the second half, and that gave a little opportunity for the Lions to be able to exert pressure the same way the Springboks do. You put the ball in on your own put in, and then you do a second shove, milk a penalty, you're up the field, and they did it 3 times, got 3 penalties, and could have been 4 later in the game.
Mm. And for you, Eddie, what was your thoughts about some of those changes? Clearly the two props came off, 2 new props came on. Was that something that you were thinking at that time? Because you were saying previously over the last couple of weeks about, it's not just the 60-minute mark, roll them out. You've got to be thinking about the game and where you're going to get that impact that you're looking for.
Oh, I thought the changes Joe made at halftime were really proactive and aggressive, which was in line with their whole strategy in the game. I think putting the 2 props on was good. Probably, Valentini obviously has got a calf problem. And he probably couldn't go any further than that. And I think Skelton might have been the same. I've got no idea. But just watching him come off, I think he might have been feeling his calf at that stage. So that's why, he went to the 47th minute. I thought Tizano, when he came on, he had a real impact. You know, he was at the breakdown. He was aggressive. He was putting pressure on them. He was pretty useful.
So a fair result then. You would have thought. Certainly, it was interesting in the ground itself when the full-time whistle was blown amongst the Wallaby fans. I think there was a disappointment, obviously, that we hadn't won the game, but there was almost that sense of, well, that was probably fair enough. It was a great contest, I think, for Wallaby fans. You know, given that the performance the week before had been poor, and this week we got exactly what we wanted in terms of that contest, in terms of that physicality. I thought Harry Wilson in particular really lifted his game in terms of his carries. It was a much, much stronger performance. But there was, to me anyway, I felt that there was an acceptance that it was a reasonably fair result. Would you agree with me that, probably the better team won? Ewen?
I think we flagged it. I think we did flag last week that it'd be close, maybe 70 minutes, and the Lions might just get there, and that's sort of what happened. By virtue of their quality, I think the Lions tries. There's some great quality in their play to be able to get back in the game and then ultimately win it. But I think it just showed, and we've talked about getting the strategy right, getting the selection right to match the strategy, and then making it happen on the field. And I think it was a really good example by the Wallabies of getting those three things lining up. You got the right players, the right strategy, and actually making it happen on the field. They got stuck into it straight away. It looked good. The crowd could feel it.
Yeah.
You could see it. The line out variety, the first two line outs, that had the Lions in 6s and 7s. They're going, oh, what's going on here? There's a lot of stuff there we hadn't seen before, and they did it late in a week. So it just shows you can reinvent the wheel in a week if you got the right sort of mix. And I thought the Wallabies did a great job there. I'll be interested to see what they do next week. I mean, they've got a couple of options still sitting there that might be useful to be able to reinforce the same type of strategy. And I'll be interested to see what the Lions do, whether they play it like they give everyone a game, or whether they want to win the series 3-0.
So just in terms of a couple of those options then, what are they? What tactical options do you see there for the Wallabies leading into this? It's still an important match. It's a Lions test match. There'll be another very big crowd in Sydney. I think Wallaby fans are feeling much, much better about their team after such a great performance. So what are a couple of the things that you'd be thinking about this week?
I saw a photo and Tupu was at the captain's run, so he's obviously in the squad and whatever. I'd have him somewhere in there just to be able to either start the game and put some pressure on, and I love his ball carries, or at worst finish the game. There's one option straight away. We talked about Tazana. He's done well off the bench. I mean, you always got to think as a coach. You got to think about the guys. You give them an opportunity, they come onto the field and make a difference. So at some point in time, you've got to find an opportunity for them to start. You can't just keep denying them. So they'll be looking closely at that. They'll probably look at the mix on the bench. So whether they go with a 6-2 again, I don't know. And obviously the fitness of other players. But they've got a couple of guys there that are, we've already talked about them, who could, Lucan would be another one that could be useful. There's a couple. We'll see what the injury roll call is first.
And for you, Eddie Jones, you're thinking about it this week. You're looking at the line. Obviously, you don't know just precisely what the Lions are going to do, but I'd be surprised if they didn't select what they think is going to be their best team to win. The 3-0 is obviously something that Andy Farrell would be very focused on achieving. So how would you be thinking about preparing your team this week, and what are some of the options that you might see? I know you're a big Tupu fan, so that's one that you'd probably be supporting as well.
I'd definitely start with him, mate. I'd start with him, mate. And again, he'd give you something extra at the start of the game. Like for the Australian point of view, they got to get in the game early.
Yep.
Again, they got to get in the game early. And I think Tupu does that. And I'd be inclined to play Tazana. And the other thing, I reckon they missed a couple of opportunities to get Suwali one-on-one with Bundy Arki. And you see at the end of the game, They had Owen Farrell at 12 Owen Farrell at 13 and Bundy Arkey at 12, and they had a line out for about 45 metres with that situation. They've got to try to get Suwali on one-on-ones early with early ball. You saw what he could do when he got an early ball. Yeah. The only time he got a real early ball, he's a powerful runner. So that there's that going. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. And for the Lions, mate, knowing Andy Farrell, he'll want to win and he'll want to win well. They won't be happy with that performance. So I think they'll pick the strongest side they can. But they got, what they had at the end of the game, Genge comes on, makes a difference. That James Ryan, he hasn't been in good form, James Ryan, but he came on and did 2 chop tackles where he just ended up being a turnover, just stopped the Australian attack. So he might come into it ahead of Chesham, to give that a work rate with Itoje. Back row, maybe Morgan might come in. Tom Curry was good again, though. So they've got a few options there.
Mm. What about you, Ewan? What would you be thinking if you're the Lions coach?
I think I said it before the game one. I think they've got to pick Morgan because they haven't got anyone else to contest for possession of the ruck. So if Australia played the same way, they haven't got anyone that's sort of set up instinctively to. I mean, they've got people that can do it, but I don't know, he just seems to have more of a Southern Hemisphere instinct about him in terms of the opportunity. So I think he might be there somewhere. We've got to take time out and say how well the number 9 played. He's such an outstanding player. He's the difference, I think, between the two teams. He's just a great player. He just sums up every moment. There was that moment where we kicked it deep and he went back and fielded the ball and he just bought enough time for support players to get back without giving away the penalty, without losing the ball. He was on his own. He had everything against him. He's a high-quality player, that guy. And I think he's the difference between the two teams.
Mm. Yeah, I reckon he's been the man of the series. And you see, when Burns scored that try in the second half, he threw the ball over the top of the first receiver, the Lowe, because he must have sensed Lowe was in a bit of space there. And so they had a 2-on-2. Lowe was able to get the outside. And then similarly for Curry's try, just went down the short side, got to the second defender, created again a one-on-one situation on the end of the line. He's been absolutely outstanding. And the other thing, I think, at the end of the first half when they were under the pump a bit, he started counter-rucking, he started tackling. He was into absolutely everything.
Mm. So in terms then of the management of the team, so that's talking about the players and their contributions and the different potential combinations or options around selection. But how do you manage a week like this? So if you're Joe Schmidt, for example, with the Wallabies, let's talk about them first in terms of, obviously, they were gutted at the end of the game. You saw the reaction of the players on the field. For me, it was great to see the pain in their faces. I've been critical of the fact that I don't feel that there's been that, but clearly you could see it the other night that was a very painful loss for them. So how, in your experience over the years, how have you managed teams to come back from disappointment when, the series is over, but it is an important match? So, Eddie Jones, how would you be thinking about, freshening the team up or psychologically? What sort of things are you thinking about trying to get them into that frame of mind so that they're ready to go like they were on Saturday night from that very first minute? What are the things that you're thinking about?
Well, first thing you can't do is expect them to do it again just the same way. So you've got to have a similar tactical advantage you think you can get. It might be about playing the same way, but you just got to dress it up a little bit differently for them, and pick out all the positives from the game. We just need to do more of that. How can we do more of that? They've obviously prepared pretty hard for that game, psychologically, tactically, just freshen it up a little bit. reward them, and see if they can go again. But it'll come down to the leaders, like who are the 4 or 5 guys who can set the tone, because you can't expect everyone to think like that. Because some of them will be thinking back in the hotel, shit, that's the best we've done. How can we do this again? But if you've got the senior guys on it from the first training session, pushing, right, here we go, we've got to go again here, boys, then you've got a chance of getting an even better performance.
Are you resting them up? Are you giving them more time to recover? Because it was a pretty physical game.
Maybe psychologically, but physically they'll be all right, mate.
Yep.
The Lions will need a bit of a break. This is the last of 38 games last week's. So we've done it with England. We've stayed down at Coogee, eaten a bit of ice cream, had a swim early in the week, and then trained hard for a couple of days. And I'm sure they'll do the similar with the Lions.
So Ewen McKenzie, what would your approach be if you were the coach of the Wallabies?
Well, I think that the Australian team's trying to establish themselves, world rankings and whatever. They're trying to re-establish themselves as a premier team, and being a good team is about being a consistent team. And so you can't just allow one. I said it last week. Budgeted. You've got the budgeted performance level of the team. They set a standard in this game. That has to be a standard that you attain again and again and again. You can't just suddenly go back and be terrible. So Eddie's mentioned that the tactical side of it, I don't think it'll change a lot. But the lineouts, for instance, the options they used have been seen, right? They're on videotape. So they're going to have to reinvent that. If they decide to play maybe 2 open sides, they're going to have to look at the lineout again tactically. But that doesn't mean you can't do it. So there's a little bit there which is all cerebral, and you can walk through all that. So it doesn't take a lot of physical practice. But I'd be harping on about the fact that if you want to be a great team, you've got to be a good team. And the good teams, they're consistent, okay? Average teams are inconsistent and they play well sometimes. And so if you want to be a great team, you've got to get past the good team, etc. And so this is a great opportunity to demonstrate that last week was no fluke, okay? And you've got to remember the Lions and all their supporters wrote Australia off as an inferior quality opposition, and they're going to win 3-0. Now, they might win 3-0, but they've made a real good fist of that second game. Mm. You've got to win the third game. You win the third game, it's a pretty close series, So overall. So then you're mixing it. When you start mixing it, then you're mixing with those guys. The next time that Australia goes to Europe, there's a little bit of respect generated by the England, Wales, Ireland, Scotland. They respect you a bit more because you were competitive, right? Now I'm talking about man for man. So there's a great opportunity for the individuals in the team to impose themselves on their opposition, but there's a great opportunity for the team to keep working from their good to great space. You're going to be a good team. Good teams are consistent. Great teams they just find a way. And if you want to be in that space, this is an opportunity to be able to demonstrate that you're in that space.
But that's the great fear, I think, if I speak on behalf of Wallaby fans, that we just haven't had that consistency for a very, very long time. And here is the opportunity now, after an outstanding performance, to do it again. But Eddie Jones is suggesting that it's the senior players have really got to play a role this week in developing that consistency. Would you agree with that, Ewan?
Yes, 100%. The coach lives this every week, right? Because the coach has to win every week, otherwise he loses his job. So it doesn't matter what game it is, he's trying to win, right? But the players, they got different contractual situations and whatever, so they're a bit more relaxed. So you made the point, Pemby, about people being happy losing. Yeah. I hate losing, right? I'm the dirtiest bloke in the dressing room, and I'd like to see other people in the same space. I'd like to think that after that performance there'll be disappointment, not disappointment at the referee or the TMO or whatever it is at the end of the game. I'd be hoping they're disappointed at not continuing and following through the strategy that was clearly working and working really well, that they weren't able to enable that to happen for longer in the game, and that they didn't make an opportunity for themselves in that last 50 minutes to get more than just 3 points. I'd be filthy on. So there's not much between it, so that you need the senior players to be able to lead the charge there and say, come on, guys, that was good. But we want to be better than that. Like we did that easy in a way. They were doing it easy.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I say that set of tactics, I don't think will go so well against the All Blacks, but brilliant tactics and well executed. So I'd really like to see them back it up, and hopefully the players will want the same.
All right, so listen, we've got to get Eddie Jones back to work. He's got a month to the Pacific Nations Cup and he's got players to interview. He's got work to do, but I need to get you both on crystal ball duty before I let you go. Eddie Jones, what are you seeing this weekend at the Olympic Stadium in Sydney? Accor, I think it's called.
Well, we just go back to that instance at Gibson Park where he races back and gets the ball. The two players who clean out over the top of him are Farrell and Furlong, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, they bust, and that's how senior players set the tone. So just think about this week. It'll be the senior players that set the tone for the team, and particularly for the Australian team, because they're trying to establish themselves, and it's always harder when you're establishing yourself to do that, to keep that belief. Whereas the Lions will be easier from saying, let's go, boys, let's go last. We're on the plane after this. Let's go. So they'll be ready to rip in the lines.
Yeah.
And it's who can start that game. And for the Australians, they need to start well to give themselves a chance to win. The Lions have shown they can stay in the fight and they can keep doing it for 80. They'll go to the 80th minute because they've got quality of players, quality of senior players to do that. So... yeah,
do you have the confidence that there's
a senior place?
Do you have the confidence that there's going to be that repeat performance, that consistent performance?
Well I think the thing we are seeing with Australia, they are getting better. I think as Joe said after the last game, that 12 months ago they would have stayed in the fight for that long in the first test. Second test, they had the courage to start well and they stayed in it, they fought, but they need to work harder off the ball. That's the big thing. Their defence let them down in the last little bit, and that was their work off the ball. So, can they keep going? Yes, they can. They can keep going, but it's going to take a massive effort from the senior players.
Okay, Ewen McKenzie, final word from you.
Well, I probably keep banging on about the same thing. I see a real clear tactical approach, and we saw it, and they did a really good job. There's no reason why that can't be repeated. So. Some games it isn't like that, but in this situation with the Lions, there's a clear way that Australia can play that's very effective. And so if they can get into that groove early and sustain it for a longer period of time and be disciplined. There were moments there from the senior players, I guess, where discipline in the second half, little actions that cost the team, cost them territory, cost them possession. And that's where the senior players can lead because they've got to show the way. We can't have those sort of poor clean-out, lazy clean-outs or giving the ball away on kicks and things like that, This is a game of keepings off. That'll win this game. So I can't say that so clearly about other test matches, but in the circumstances and the way to beat these guys is clear. So I'm just hoping that the players can enact that for a longer period of time, and I'm sure that they can win.
Very good. Well, listen, boys, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with the audience once again. It was great. It was such a great occasion, I think, for rugby in Australia. You don't get better. It was a test match of the highest order. It was an occasion of the highest order. Melbourne, a magnificent city. And clearly they've got 7 pool matches in the Rugby World Cup, 2 round of 16s. The actual match day presentation at the MCG was brilliant. So big congratulations to Rugby Australia for everything that they put on and for Melbourne and for the whole presentation of the whole thing. It was a great weekend and a great weekend for rugby, and we all look forward to this match coming up this week. So thanks again to Eddie Jones and Ewen McKenzie. Just a reminder that on Substack we do have the Sydney Guide, which is out now and published, and we'll be continuing to put content on the Substack. So that's the Rugby Unity Substack. Make sure that you get involved in that. And please, if you'd like to like, subscribe, comment, share, if you've got questions for Eddie or Ewen, please let us know, and we will pass them on. But listen, it's time to leave the program this week, so please be kind to each other. My name is David Pembroke, and it's bye for now.